Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Stratford Public Schools Finance Committee meeting. It is Monday, March 28th. My name is Amy Wiltsey, and we will get this meeting started at 6:29 p.m. First on our agenda is the acceptance from our minutes of our February 28th meeting. Do I have a motion to accept? Mr. Proto, second. Ms. Liddell, thank you very much. And I will be unanimous vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Next, Ms. Mangini, budget transfers, none for March, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
We did a great this month.
All right, thank you. And proposed. Would you like to present with us, please, the bus transportation contract?
Certainly. In your packets, I know that you did receive a copy of the letter that outlines the changes in the terms of our agreement with Durham. And the state somewhat regulates district bus contracts in that we can never have an agreement that's more than 5 years. And in our current contract, it does allow us to have extensions. And I did work with the town purchasing agent before we actually explored this opportunity with Durham. I think for the most part, from everything I've heard since I arrived in the district, and with the experience that Dr. Sunday in particular had over the past year since we've been pretty much back to normal with bus transportation, we felt that Stratford has always had a good partner in Durham school services. I'll particularly note how fortunate we were not to deal with what a lot of our neighboring school districts had to deal with the driver shortages this past year. And I feel as though Durham has always been there whenever we've had any questions or concerns. Nevertheless, the most important part of our contract negotiations involved the financial engineer. And as we look towards the previous contract, I had noted when I first arrived that the 4% increases each year seemed a little bit high to me because they were higher than what I was accustomed to. But as we explored how transportation contracts have been settling, and with some of the information shared with us by Durham, which we did confirm, they are actually settling significantly higher right now. And there's so many variables for bus companies with driver shortages and having to pay premiums that it is a challenge for any of the bus companies to negotiate these kinds of contracts. So we were very pleased as our negotiations went on that we were able to secure this 1.5% increase in years 1 and 2. I really think it's most advantageous to the district, obviously to our budget. I will tell you that is the number that's already factored into our proposed budget. And I think as Dr. Sunday and I really explored the options for the subsequent 3-year period, we were toying with whether or not that was in our best interest as well as Durham's. And the more information that we received and in talking to some of our colleagues and some transportation companies and professionals, quite frankly, we were told that right now that is probably our best option, is the best practice, because there are so many variables out there that it would probably be, it's in our best interest to have such a low projected increase for those years, but it's also more than likely we would never have gotten that if we had gone out into the process world. So for all of those reasons, we feel that we're bringing you a very competitive agreement, and we are hopeful that you will support it for a renewal. All the other terms of the agreement remain the same, which have been workable and they've been solid. So we really
Great, thank you. I got to speak to each of our board members about our comfort level and pushing forward a vote for tonight, so we are going to do that. I will entertain a motion that we accept the new proposed budget for Durham Transportation Services for Stratford Public Schools.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Yes. Mr. Henry.
Yeah. So in the chart you had sent out, was that an hourly rate? It's not in our packet here. No.
No, I'm sorry. That is a per day per bus.
Okay. And it talked about what I thought I understood there's some special ed transportation as well?
It does provide special education buses that are in district. So out of district, we have the option of either choosing Durham if they're the most competitive, or we do sometimes use other vendors if the pricing is better.
So in our budget books, you had in 510 transportation, the student transportation. This was the first line item. Is that solely the Durham contract, or is the special ed transportation, the second line, included in that? Or?
It depends what you're looking at. In 510, if it's a summary, then yes, it's all of them combined, and then they're separated. The 510 is the object code, and then there's an additional code at the end, that's a 4-number code that breaks it down by regular education, vocational regular transportation, vocational transportation, special ed transportation, etc.
So, yeah, and I mean that the special ed. So I'm just trying to see what this contract covers in the. On page 77 of our budget book, there's 2 line items. One of them is student transportation, one of them is special ed transportation.
Okay, then it is separate. It's only it will cover a portion of the special ed, that's our in-district students that ride Durham buses or special buses through Durham. And then it is the regular transportation, which is all other in-district transportation.
So you have a line item, student transportation 2.6 million. And then special ed, 2.9 million. Will it cover the entire 2.6 as part of the 2.9?
Correct. Instead, that 2.9 million includes, I believe, don't quote me on this, but it's around 1.4 or 1.6 that's Durham, and the balance is our outplacement that we utilize other vendors.
So I mean, I don't know that I can figure out which is which, looking at this budget book. Can you give us a breakdown? I don't need it now for this vote, but for future budget talks and whatever else we might enter into. So you're saying 1.6 and the 2.6 million are included in the Durham contract, and that would leave about 1.3 million that are from other vendors? Plus or minus? Okay.
I can't remember, but yes, I will absolutely provide that information.
Are there any other questions?
Pam, years 1 and 2 are set. I'm not clear from the letter. In year 3, 4, and 5, in any of those years, are we locked, or can we renegotiate?
We can renegotiate.
That just wasn't abundantly clear how I read it. And also, in their cost avoidance section, they indicate that their drivers, I think their drivers, joined, unionized in January of 2021 last year. These costs do not include any of their union costs. Is that correct?
No, they do. Actually, when they were going through their negotiations last year, they reached out to Dr. Robinson and I to kind of give us a heads up on what was going on, and they did, from what I understand, significantly increase the hourly for drivers.
So when they say these costs are not built into our current rates, they're referring to 21, 22, not the going forward rates.
The rates that are not built in will be subsequent years 3, 4, and 5 because they are renegotiating the contract for year 3, and that's their concern.
Okay, that's not quite how I read that section, but
I'm sorry if it
that's why
wasn't clear.
it's not clear the way it's written, that there are additional wage and benefit costs that did not exist when we last bid this contract, so these costs are not built into our current rates. And I assume the current rates that they were referring to were the rates that we're looking at for 22, 23 through 26, 27.
Correct.
So they're not built in.
To those, correct, because they simply don't know what additional costs they may absorb through the next negotiation.
So we're not going to see, so for 22, 23, and 23, 24, there will be no increase.
There'll be a 1.5.
Well, I mean 1.5, but we're not going to pick up any additional costs there.
Absolutely not.
24 through 27, is the 3% locked in, or if they have a change, will that, if they have a labor cost change as a result of their union contract or collective bargaining, can that increase?
It can increase, and we have the ability to go out to bid at that time, and they will give us advance notice. We have that discussion.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mrs. Mary Jane? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote to move this bus contract for Durham from the Finance Committee to the Board. Mr. Proto?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedell?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Corcoran? Yes. Mrs. Carol Fabian?
Yes.
Mrs. Puckey?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, financial reports, Mrs. Mary Jane.
I just wanted to take a moment to kind of walk you through what I provide each month. It does reflect all your expenditures and encumbrances, and you receive from me not only the monthly financial report, but you also receive a financial status report. And this is something that I have used for many years because I think it's important that the board have a good sense by object code of where we think we might have savings versus where there's cost. And I do try to provide you with a brief summary of what those accounts, object code accounts, entail and why I think there's either going to be a balance or a deficit in those accounts. Obviously, we've talked about salaries on a number of occasions, and we are projecting currently an $892,668 balance. We've brought you transfer requests to put into the salary reserve account with a lot of detailed explanations both in the fall and last month. And I will tell you we anticipate bringing in additional transfer. We've had some vacancies in our non-certified, so we believe there's savings there. Each month, we kind of put that one aside because it looked like we were about to fill a number of the positions that just didn't work out. So at this point, Susan Nicholson and I have sat down and we are calculating exactly what we've at least saved year to date. So if the position does get filled at the end of April, at least we will identify the savings that we know we have recognized so far. So we will be getting that information to you. And we continue to look at the certified as well. We do have a number of teachers that are out that are on maternity leave or other personal leave, some of whom have time that's not paid and or they simply, coming back sooner, later. There's always adjustments. So we'll get that information to you as well. And obviously each month we try to bring you the most up-to-date information. Benefits, again, we are projecting an $85,000 potential year-end balance, primarily right now due to favorable unemployment and, of course, the American Rescue Plan credit that we got for a small portion of the year. And, of course, with the savings in salaries, we anticipate some offsetting savings in FICA. Quite frankly, that's not much when it's the teachers. We only pay a 1.45% employer tax on those dollars, but when it's non-certified, we do pay a 7.65%. So it could be a considerable amount. So we are working on a better analysis to provide you with that. The 300 professional services, as you well know, our deficit primarily is clinical costs associated with additional services through PPS. Property services primarily are repair accounts and some of our utility accounts, and such as electricity and water. They all appear to be tracking on budget, so we're not really anticipating any savings. Again, we make a lot of assumptions. The utilities, obviously, we're analyzing monthly, but as far as repairs, I defer to Mr. Ruggiero, who's always trying to stay on top of the needs of the schools and those accounts. In addition, we have the 500 accounts, which are tuition, transportation, and again, we have our issues with not only our out-of-district tuition and transportation deficits, but as reported last time, the workers' comp seems to be running really high this year, and we could potentially have, projecting maybe a $75,000 deficit in that account as well. So that's the number represented there. Supplies and materials are our 600 accounts, and as I've said since the fall, we have put a spending freeze on the accounts of instructional supplies, textbooks, workbooks, and library books. Obviously, we encourage districts to stop spending for anything unless they really needed it, and at that point, they had to get special permission from me, and I would discuss it with Dr. Leva and Dr. Sunday. There are minimal amounts of accounts within that 600 because we don't have a whole lot of discretionary accounts. Obviously, we have to continue custodial supplies because we have to put toilet paper and soap and paper towels in our schools. Some of the 600 accounts are utility accounts, so we certainly can not utilize those accounts. So the small amount that's there, we anticipate about half of that amount that was remaining in the fall as savings. Now, you need to remember that by October, when we recognize the special ed deficit, much of those discretionary accounts are already being spent to prepare for the new school year. So we get purchase orders immediately in July, August, and September. So that's why there is probably not as much as we had hoped or we would have imagined, but that's pretty much the same amount I have reported to you since the fall as far as potential savings. Equipment and dues and fees are all tracking on budget at the moment. We're very cautious with the equipment. Most of that money was for computer equipment and supplies. And dues and fees are just obligatory, so we obviously feel we don't utilize most of those. Having said all that, as of the end of February, our deficit that we know from special education is $2.3 million. Obviously, the district is working very hard to offset a lot of that. And we are right now at a $1.2 million projected deficit, which could even be lower as we work through our process for identifying additional savings and salaries. I won't really say it's fortunate that we have those savings because it's really coming at the cost of what all of our principals in the audience deal with day to day, and that's trying to fill positions, which has been really challenging right now. So stay tuned. We'll just continue to bring you all this good information. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions?
I know, Ms. Mangini, you and I have had some emails, and the word in the, I guess in the business environment, the word freeze means a little different than the one you're using at this point. And I appreciate the frugality that's created some of these savings, but it's confusing when you say freeze, because in my mind, freeze means we're not spending money in that line item. It's a $2.8 million line item, and we're going to spend about $2.55 million. So, the word freeze, I don't know if this is accurate as I would like it to be. Restricted spending, perhaps, but just not.
I respect that, but again, I will just remind the board in particular that I was always clear about which accounts that we did this freeze or a restriction, which is a very good term as well. They were always the limited accounts.
Mr. Carter?
Yeah, just on the professional services and the other purchase services, I'm assuming the majority of those are related to our SPED accounts. Are those deficits projected based on our current number of special ed students, or have we built in some increase between now and the end of the year that we're taking into account?
Excellent question, but I will tell you, every financials you get from me is always based on actual 2 year to date, and this was as of February 28th. So no, we have not built in anything, and it changes daily as Ms. Burgess can attest to.
So we're seeing students coming in on a somewhat regular basis. I know you're going to talk about that a little bit later when we do enrollment, but
I can just share with you now.
I don't want to take away your thunder from down there a little bit.
So we have continued to welcome students into our district, and I know I gave you guys a report before with a number on it that I think was right around 125. We're up to 168 new students this year that have been welcomed into Stratford with exceptionalities that do cost different amounts of money. We're also seeing an increase in students' mental health and emotional needs, which also comes out of that 300 line. Those are those professional services, risk assessments, support, and different activities that we need. So we've seen an increase in that, which I do share with Ms. Mangini when I see those spikes starting to happen, so they're aware. But again, everything she gives you guys is actuals, despite maybe us knowing that we have some increased needs. But we have continued to welcome new students into our district, and we have continued to provide them with the appropriate supports based on their IEP needs.
So it's safe to assume that this number is probably going to be
Every week we
deficit.
have new students.
The deficit will increase.
So far, we have not had a free week. We have a lot of new, welcoming new families here that are wonderful.
Thank you.
Mrs. Duff?
Ms. Burgess, just a quick follow-up to that. How much lead time do you get on a new student entering the district, or does it vary greatly?
That all depends on registration. So on one of the first steps of registration, when a family registers, they're asked to check a box that delineates whether their child has any IEP or 504 needs. And if we do, I get that paperwork right away. And then we look through it and we assess what we're going to need in order to service the student and push things through. Sometimes that box doesn't get checked, so we have a lot less time because we find that out when the file comes.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that. So if a family comes in on Monday and, hey, we moved into town over the weekend and their child's going to start school on Monday, you may find out on Monday.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Mangini. Dr. Fleming with a grant update?
Good evening, everybody. Should be a brief update. We're in the quiet part of the grant season. This is when the state's ramping down last year and ramping up next year, so there's not a ton going on. There are no new grants to report on your grants report this month, so the only changes will be in the columns on encumbrance and expenditures and remaining. It's just math as we spend the grants down. We do have four grants in progress. We have the school readiness grant going in this week, which funds 3 of our preschool rooms. We have the adult education grant due later this in April, mid-April, and that's obviously for the mandated adult education programs. And we are working on our IDEA special education grants. It's one application, but it's 2 different grants in the same application, the one for K-12 and the one for preschool. Those are all in progress. And next month, I believe we'll have at least 1 or 2 new grants to report to you. Some of them have passed certain hurdles with the state, and we think I'll have them for you next month. But the state's a long process sometimes. It's 4 or 5. Once you get approval, there's still 4 steps to happen at the state before I can put it on the list here. So I think we'll have some stuff for you next month, but that's all there is for this month. And I'm happy to take questions.
I think you're lucky if it's only 4 steps. Are there any questions for Dr. Fleming? Mrs. Riddell?
Just a quick question. On the summary of the grants that we have, there's a school violence prevention program grant, and there's a note that there's a 25% matching requirement.
Correct?
Who is that? What's the
The town is providing that match. So it's a federal grant, and we applied for it and won it and had to promise that the town or the district would deliver a 25% match. And town funds have been used for that.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yep. Is there a way we can get some job descriptions of a lot of the grants? I know right now it's really just summaries, but is there actual job descriptions of some of the grants, like the new school climate position for Johnson?
I mean, there are job descriptions in HR. They're not part of the grants that I turn in. But yeah, I mean, every position has a job description, but they're not, 99% of the time, they're not part of the grant application.
Any other questions? Dr. Fleming? Okay, thank you. Mrs. Borges, special ed.
you guys pretty much have already heard about Ms. Mangini. So obviously, we're continuing to track the deficit in the 3 areas, and a lot of the deficit, as I told you, I shared with Ms. Mangini, and I'll share with you guys, we have seen an increase in mental health needs for our students, which are increasing the cost in the 300 line. And we have seen an increase in students moving in, which requires additional transportation. So we've seen an increase in the need for transportation and an increase for student outplacements. We've also had some new students move in that are students that required outplacements. So those are continued areas for us to monitor, to watch, and to support. I do believe Stratford has done a beautiful job supporting all of our students. So.
Other questions for Ms. Borges? I have one, if it's okay.
Sure.
I believe it was last month that you celebrated the work one of the staff had done bringing kids back, and I really enjoyed hearing that. Has there been any updates on children coming back into the Stratford School
Yep,
system?
so far this year, our supervisor for out-of-district placements has successfully returned 19 students to our district. I think for her, she maybe feels a little bit like it's not enough because we've also had new students move in and students that have had to go out, so the number has stayed the same. But from our perspective, that's huge. 19 students have returned back to our buildings. 19 students are included in our everyday, today efforts in our schools, and we are really proud of that.
Thank you. Okay, next we have number C4, food services report.
So much nicer this year bringing this report to you. As you see, the ending fund balance appears to be negative. However, as I mentioned previously, we're always a little bit lagging behind with our state reimbursement. So we did note down there that we are about to receive reimbursement for December and January, totaling slightly over $938,000, which actually brings us to a positive balance of $665,563. So we are doing very well.
Good news.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Mancini regarding food services? Mr. Hunt?
I think the town had made a payment for the Board of Ed to Sodexo. Was it last year or earlier this year? How much was that payment for them?
We paid the deficit from our year-end balance, so it was paid by the Board of Education appropriation. And it was, again, a test in my memory, but it was about $1 million last year. And that was a 10-year deficit that was accumulated.
So that $1 million, so what you're saying basically is we had $1 million surplus last year?
Due to COVID, we certainly did, and we were kind of hoping all year that that was going to happen so we could get in a good place since we knew we had to go out to bid for food service.
And so then the town, in turn, took that $1 million surplus and paid one of the Board of Ed bills with it?
Paid our food service, correct.
So in reality, it was not a surplus last year.
There was still a remaining surplus of over $700,000.
So the Board of Ed had a $1.7 million surplus, and then the town took $1 million of it and paid one of the Board of Ed's bills, and still left $700,000 as a surplus?
The accounting doesn't quite work that way. It was actually a matter of the board approved the use of the funds in June of $1 million to pay the deficit to Sodexo, and since it hit the town's audit very clearly, we were encouraged by the town to get that deficit paid down, and when we saw the opportunity to, we jumped at it. We did discuss that with the town finance director, and the money that the auditors concluded at the end of the year that actually were returned to the town were over $700,000.
Are there any questions regarding food services? Okay. So we will move to enrollment status, please.
Okay. Again, our enrollment has been increasing this year. As you can see, the in-district subtotal probably tells the clearest story about what is happening in our classrooms. And our year-to-year increase from March 1st, 2021 to March of 2022 is about 161 student increase. And from October, we have increased to 67, and October 1st, of course, is the date of the enrollment that we have to report to the state officially. And we do have the backup information, so if anyone has any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Are there any questions regarding enrollment? Please speak up.
Ms. Mangini, I'm not sure if you're the appropriate person to answer this, or Dr. Sumner or somebody else would be able to answer this, but what are the contractual limits to classroom sizes for each? I know it depends on the grade, but there's it's split elementary, upper, lower, right.
Actually, I think it might be in your packet. Is it part of the, it's not in the pieces that's on financial? Is you're about to approve hopefully this evening?
Secretary.
That's
Oh,
secretary's
secretary,
contract.
I'm sorry. Regardless, I think when that contract has been completed, we did adjust for next year. So right now, as you might recall, our enrollment by grade and class size takes in a factor for special ed students where they count 1.5. That will no longer be the case next year, as recommended. And I know that our primary levels, again, trying to go by memory, I was working on this today, so it really should be in my head, but it is 24, I believe, for kindergarten, first and second. I'll be happy to send it to all of you in the definitive, but it is about 27 for the higher grades. And then I think at the high school level, we are at 32, and I don't know, do you remember?
Next year's contract.
Next year,
Yeah.
correct. But I will send that to you.
In middle schools and included in high school?
Yeah, I believe so.
So those numbers currently, it's pre-K through second grade is 27, third through sixth it's 32, 7 through 12 is 35.
I was totally wrong. Thank you, Dr.
Those are the new numbers? Okay.
These are current.
Those are current.
Yeah,
So
the new
obviously,
number.
we had a mutually beneficial contract negotiation process with SEA.
Are there any other questions regarding enrollment? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Mangini. Any other old business, new business? Nothing? Okay. Well, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting at 7:02. All right, thank you very much.